The morning sun cast long shadows across the rugged terrain of Afghanistan's Helmand province as Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez adjusted her rifle scope for the third time in 10 minutes. The 25-year-old sniper from El Paso, Texas, had been lying motionless behind her Barrett M82.50 caliber rifle for over 4 hours, watching a compound through her crosshairs that intelligence suggested housed high-value targets. Maria had earned her place among the Marine Corps' elite snipers through sheer determination and an almost supernatural ability to read wind patterns and calculate bullet trajectory. Growing up on her grandfather's ranch, she had learned to shoot by hunting jackrabbits that darted unpredictably across the desert landscape. Her grandfather, a Korean War veteran, had taught her that patience was the sniper's greatest weapon, followed closely by the ability to make impossible shots when the moment demanded it. The compound below buzzed with activity. Through her scope, Maria could see 3 figures moving between buildings, their movements suggesting military training. Her spotter, Corporal James Mitchell, lay beside her with powerful binoculars, feeding her information about wind speed, distance, and target movement patterns. The intelligence briefing had been clear. These were bomb makers responsible for the improvised explosive devices that had killed 6 Marines in the past month. What made this mission particularly challenging was the terrain. The targets were positioned at different elevations within the compound, separated by concrete walls and metal structures. The distance to the nearest target was 847 meters, while the farthest was nearly 950 meters away. The wind was inconsistent, gusting from different directions as it bounced off the rocky hills surrounding the area. Maria's commanding officer, Captain Thompson, had initially assigned 3 different sniper teams to handle the targets simultaneously. The plan was to coordinate their shots to eliminate all 3 bomb makers before they could escape or destroy evidence. However, 2 of the sniper teams had been forced to relocate due to enemy patrols, leaving Maria as the only shooter in position when the targets appeared. Through her radio, she heard Captain Thompson's voice crackle with static. "Viper 1, this is command. We have confirmation that the targets are preparing to move in approximately 15 minutes. The other teams cannot establish firing positions in time. Can you engage multiple targets?" Maria studied the scene below through her scope. The 3 targets had positioned themselves in a way that seemed almost intentional, as if they were testing her abilities. The first target stood near a doorway on the ground floor of the main building. The second had climbed to a rooftop approximately 30 meters to the left and 15 meters higher. The third target was moving between storage containers on the far side of the compound, occasionally appearing in a narrow gap between 2 metal structures. The physics of what Captain Thompson was asking seemed impossible. Even the most skilled snipers typically engaged 1 target at a time, allowing for readjustment and follow-up shots if necessary. Attempting to eliminate multiple targets with individual shots would give the remaining targets time to take cover or escape. But there was something about the alignment of the targets that sparked an idea in Maria's mind. She had heard stories from her grandfather about legendary shots made during wartime, moments when skill and luck combined to create what seemed like miracles. He had told her about a sniper in World War II who had ricocheted a single bullet off a church bell to eliminate an enemy machine gun crew. While such stories were often embellished over time, Maria understood the underlying principle. Sometimes the impossible became possible when a sniper truly understood ballistics and environmental factors. Corporal Mitchell noticed her extended silence and whispered, "What are you thinking, Rodriguez?" Maria continued to study the targets through her scope, calculating angles and distances. The concrete wall behind the first target was positioned at precisely the right angle to potentially redirect a bullet toward the second target's position. From there, if the bullet maintained enough velocity and trajectory, it might continue toward the third target's location. The margin for error was microscopic, and the shot would require perfect timing, precise aim, and favorable environmental conditions. "Mitchell, I need exact measurements on wind speed and direction at 3-second intervals," she whispered back. "And I need you to track the movement pattern of target 3. He appears every 22 seconds in that gap between the containers." As Mitchell began providing the requested information, Maria made minute adjustments to her rifle scope and calculated the complex trajectory required for what she was contemplating. The .50 caliber bullet from her Barrett M82 would travel at approximately 2,800 feet per second, giving her the velocity needed for the ricochet shots. But the angles had to be perfect. The weight of the mission pressed down on her shoulders. These weren't just random enemy combatants. They were the bomb makers who had been terrorizing supply convoys and killing Marines. Intelligence indicated they were planning to move their operation to a new location within hours, making this potentially the only opportunity to stop them. Through her scope, Maria watched as the first target moved into the optimal position near the doorway. The concrete wall behind him was scarred from previous battles, but appeared solid enough to provide the ricochet she needed. The second target had settled into a routine on the rooftop, appearing predictably every 30 seconds as he monitored the surrounding area. The third target continued his pattern of movement between the storage containers. Captain Thompson's voice came through the radio again. Viper 1, we need a decision. The targets are showing signs of preparing to leave. Maria took a deep breath and made her choice. Command, this is Viper 1. I'm going to attempt a single shot to engage all 3 targets simultaneously. There was a pause before Captain Thompson responded. Rodriguez, repeat your last transmission. Sir, I believe I can eliminate all 3 targets with 1 bullet using calculated ricochets off the compound structures. The radio remained silent for several seconds. Maria knew that what she was proposing sounded like something from an action movie rather than a realistic military operation. But her calculations indicated it was possible, and the alternative was allowing the bomb makers to escape and continue their deadly work. Finally, Captain Thompson's voice returned. Viper 1, you are authorized to attempt the shot. All other units will maintain position and prepare for follow-up engagement if necessary. Maria felt her heart rate slow as she entered the focused state that had made her one of the Corps' most effective snipers. She controlled her breathing, feeling each heartbeat and timing her shot to occur during the natural pause between breaths. Mitchell continued providing wind readings, his voice barely audible even though he was lying just inches away. The moment approached when all 3 targets would be in the necessary positions. Maria had calculated that she would have approximately a 3-second window when the alignment would be perfect. The first target remained stationary near the doorway. The second target appeared on the rooftop, right on schedule. She could hear Mitchell counting down the seconds until the third target would appear in the gap between the containers. Target 3 visible in 5, 4, 3, 2. Maria's finger tightened on the trigger as she made final microscopic adjustments to her aim. Everything she had learned about ballistics, wind compensation, and ricochet angles came together in this single moment. The lives of future Marines depended on the precision of this shot, and failure would mean allowing dangerous enemies to escape and continue their lethal work. The crosshairs settled on the exact spot where the bullet needed to strike the concrete wall behind the first target. Maria's breathing stopped, her heartbeat seemed to pause, and the world narrowed to the small circle visible through her rifle scope. In the distance, she could hear the faint sounds of the compound's daily activities, unaware that everything was about to change in the span of a single second. This was the moment that would either establish Maria Rodriguez as a legend among Marine snipers or serve as a reminder that some shots are simply too ambitious to attempt. The Barrett M82 lay steady against her shoulder, its weight familiar and comforting. The trigger waited for the gentle pressure that would send a .50 caliber bullet on what might be the most remarkable journey in sniper history. As Target 3 moved into position exactly as predicted, Maria knew there would be no second chance. This shot would define not only her military career, but potentially save the lives of countless Marines who would otherwise fall victim to the deadly improvised explosive devices created by the 3 men in her crosshairs. The trigger break was clean and crisp, exactly as Maria had trained for thousands of hours on shooting ranges from Quantico to Camp Pendleton. The Barrett M82 recoiled against her shoulder with its familiar powerful thrust as the .50 caliber bullet left the barrel at precisely 2,847 feet per second. Through her scope, Maria tracked the bullet's path as it cut through the morning air, carrying with it the hopes of every Marine who had lost friends to improvised explosive devices. The first target, standing casually near the doorway while examining what appeared to be electronic components, never saw death approaching. The massive .50 caliber bullet struck him center mass with devastating effect, the impact spinning him backward toward the concrete wall. But this was only the beginning of the bullet's deadly journey. As Maria had calculated, the bullet's trajectory and remaining velocity carried it into the reinforced concrete wall at precisely the angle needed for deflection. The impact sent concrete fragments flying, but more importantly, it redirected the bullet upward and to the left, exactly as her ballistics calculations had predicted. The laws of physics, combined with Maria's understanding of ricochet mechanics, transformed the wall into a launching pad for the second phase of her impossible shot. Corporal Mitchell watched through his binoculars in stunned silence as the deflected bullet arced upward toward the rooftop where the second target stood. The bomb maker had been scanning the surrounding hills with his own binoculars, searching for signs of the American forces he suspected were watching him. He never completed his surveillance sweep. The bullet, having lost some velocity from the ricochet but retaining enough energy to remain lethal, struck the second target in the upper torso. The impact sent him tumbling backward across the flat rooftop, his binoculars spinning away into the courtyard below. But even this second successful hit was not the end of the bullet's remarkable journey. The angle of the rooftop and the bullet's continued forward momentum carried it beyond the second target toward the storage containers where the third bomb maker moved in his predictable pattern. Maria held her breath as she watched through her scope, knowing that this final phase of the shot was the most challenging. The bullet had to maintain enough velocity and accuracy to be lethal while traveling through an increasingly complex path. The third target appeared in the gap between storage containers exactly as Mitchell had predicted, carrying what appeared to be timing devices and electronic detonators. He was focused on his deadly cargo, unaware that a single bullet fired nearly 3 seconds earlier was about to complete an impossible journey. The deflected bullet, now traveling at reduced velocity but still lethal, caught him as he stepped into the narrow opening between the metal containers. The impact spun the third target around, sending the bomb-making components flying across the compound's dusty ground. Electronic devices that had been destined to kill American Marines scattered like broken toys, their deadly purpose forever ended by Maria's extraordinary marksmanship. For several seconds, the compound fell silent except for the echo of the single gunshot bouncing off the surrounding hills. Maria remained perfectly still behind her rifle, hardly believing what she had just witnessed. In her peripheral vision, she could see Corporal Mitchell slowly lowering his binoculars, his face a mixture of amazement and disbelief. Through her radio earpiece, Maria heard Captain Thompson's voice, unusually quiet and formal. "Viper 1, report your target status." Maria continued to observe the compound through her scope, confirming what she had seen. All 3 targets were down and motionless. The bomb-making operation had been completely eliminated with a single shot that had defied conventional military wisdom and the normal limits of sniper capabilities. "Command, this is Viper 1, Maria responded, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "All 3 targets are neutralized. Single shot, multiple impacts confirmed." The radio remained silent for nearly 30 seconds before Captain Thompson's voice returned, now carrying a note of wonder. "Viper 1, did you say single shot?" "Confirmed, sir. 1 bullet, 3 targets eliminated through calculated ricochet trajectory." Even as she spoke the words, Maria could hardly believe them herself. The shot she had just executed was the kind of legendary marksmanship that would be talked about in Marine Corps shooting circles for decades. It was the type of achievement that separated ordinary snipers from those whose names became part of military folklore. Corporal Mitchell finally found his voice. "Rodriguez, I've been spotting for snipers for 6 years, and I've never seen anything like that. Hell, I've never even heard stories like that." Through her scope, Maria continued to monitor the compound for any signs of additional enemies or movement. The intelligence briefing had indicated that other hostile forces might be in the area, and she knew that maintaining security was paramount even after the successful completion of her mission. But part of her mind was still processing what had just occurred. The mathematics involved in the shot had been incredibly complex. She had needed to calculate not only the initial trajectory to the first target, but also the precise angle and velocity required for the bullet to ricochet successfully toward the second target. From there, she had to account for the additional trajectory changes needed to engage the third target while compensating for wind effects, gravity, and the bullet's decreasing velocity after 2 impacts. What made the achievement even more remarkable was the timing element. All 3 targets had to be in precisely the right positions at the moment the bullet and its ricochets reached them. The margin for error had been measured in fractions of seconds and inches. A slight change in wind direction, a minor variation in the concrete wall's surface, or a deviation in any target's movement pattern would have resulted in failure. Captain Thompson's voice returned to the radio. "Viper 1, maintain position and continue surveillance. We're sending a recovery team to secure the compound and gather intelligence from the site." As Maria settled in to provide overwatch for the incoming Marines, she reflected on the training that had made such a shot possible. Her grandfather's lessons about patience and precision had been foundational, but years of Marine Corps training had refined those skills into something extraordinary. Countless hours on shooting ranges, studying ballistics manuals, and practicing under various environmental conditions had prepared her for this moment. The recovery team's approach took nearly an hour as they moved carefully through the terrain to avoid potential ambushes or booby traps. Maria tracked their progress through her scope while simultaneously monitoring the compound for any signs of enemy reinforcement or activity. The responsibility of providing security for her fellow Marines was just as important as the remarkable shot she had just executed. When the recovery team finally reached the compound, their radio reports confirmed what Maria had observed. All 3 targets had been eliminated, and the bomb-making materials scattered throughout the area represented enough explosive components to create dozens of improvised explosive devices. The intelligence gathered from the site would help identify other bomb-making cells and prevent future attacks on Marine positions. Staff Sergeant Williams, leading the recovery team, provided a detailed report over the radio. "Command, this is Recovery Team Alpha. We have confirmed 3 enemy Kia and have secured significant quantities of bomb-making materials including electronic timers, detonators, and chemical precursors. The site contains enough materials to construct approximately 40 improvised explosive devices." The magnitude of what had been prevented began to sink in for Maria. Those 40 potential bombs could have killed or injured hundreds of Marines over the coming months. Supply convoys, patrol routes, and base perimeters would have been targeted with deadly devices created in the compound she was now watching through her scope. Captain Thompson's voice carried a new level of respect when he addressed her again. "Viper 1, your actions today have likely saved dozens of American lives. The intelligence value of this operation cannot be overstated." As the recovery team continued their work in the compound below, Maria allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The shot she had just made would certainly be analyzed and discussed by military ballistics experts and sniper instructors. The physics involved would be studied, the techniques examined, and the calculations verified. But, for Maria, the most important result was the knowledge that dangerous enemies had been eliminated and Marine lives had been saved. Corporal Mitchell broke the contemplative silence. "Rodriguez, they're going to want to know exactly how you calculated that shot. I mean, the guys back at Quantico aren't going to believe this without a detailed breakdown of the mathematics involved." Maria smiled slightly as she continued to scan the compound through her scope. "Well, Mitchell, I guess we're going to be writing a very interesting after-action report." The debriefing room at Forward Operating Base Chapman buzzed with an unusual energy as senior officers gathered to hear Maria Rodriguez's account of what was already being called the miracle shot of Helmand Province. Colonel Sarah Bennett, the base's commanding officer, sat at the head of a rectangular table surrounded by intelligence officers, ballistics experts, and senior Marines who had served multiple combat tours but had never witnessed anything quite like what Maria had accomplished. Maria sat straight-backed in her chair, still wearing her camouflage utilities from the morning mission. Beside her, Corporal Mitchell clutched a detailed notebook filled with wind readings, distance measurements, and timing calculations that had supported the impossible shot. The atmosphere in the room was part celebration, part scientific inquiry, as everyone present understood they were documenting a moment that would become part of Marine Corps legend. Colonel Bennett opened the session with characteristic directness. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, what you accomplished today challenges everything we thought we knew about the practical limits of sniper engagements. I want you to walk us through every aspect of your decision-making process, from the moment you realized multiple targets needed to be engaged simultaneously." Maria nodded and began her account, describing the tactical situation that had developed when the other sniper teams were forced to relocate. She explained how the positioning of the 3 bomb makers had created what she recognized as a potential ricochet opportunity, despite the extremely low probability of success. Major Frank Morrison, the base's senior intelligence officer, interrupted with a question. "Rodriguez, help me understand the timeline here. From the moment you decided to attempt this shot to pulling the trigger, how much time did you have to calculate the ballistics?" "Approximately 4 minutes, sir," Maria replied. "I had been studying the target positions for over an hour, but once command asked if I could engage multiple targets, I had about 4 minutes to work out the mathematics and confirm the shot was theoretically possible." Captain Janet Foster, a ballistics expert who had been flown in from Quantico specifically for this debriefing, leaned forward with intense interest. "Staff Sergeant, I've spent 15 years studying ricochet mechanics, and What you're describing should have been impossible to calculate in real time. Can you explain your methodology? Maria turned to Mitchell, who opened his notebook and began reading the environmental data he had recorded. Wind speed varied between 8 and 12 knots, direction predominantly from the southwest, but with gusts shifting up to 15 degrees. Temperature was approximately 78 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity at 32%. The key factors I considered, Maria continued, were the angle of the concrete wall behind the first target, which I estimated at 67 degrees relative to my shooting position, and the distance differential between targets. The wall surface appeared to be reinforced concrete, scarred but solid, which would provide a predictable ricochet angle if I could hit it at precisely the right point. Captain Foster made rapid calculations on a tablet computer as Maria spoke. The physics actually support what you're describing, but the margin for error would have been microscopic. We're talking about hitting a target area on that wall measuring perhaps 6 inches by 6 inches to achieve the proper deflection angle. Colonel Bennett looked around the room at the assembled experts. Let me ask the obvious question. Has anyone here ever heard of a successful triple engagement using ricochets from a single shot? The room fell silent as officers exchanged glances. Finally, Master Gunnery Sergeant Robert Hayes, a 30-year veteran with extensive sniper experience, spoke up. Ma'am, I've heard stories going back to World War II about legendary shots involving ricochets, but nothing documented or verified. What Staff Sergeant Rodriguez accomplished today is unprecedented in modern military history. The debriefing continued for nearly 3 hours as Maria answered detailed questions about every aspect of the shot. Ballistics experts wanted to understand her calculations, intelligence officers needed to document the tactical situation, and training specialists were already considering how this achievement might influence future sniper instruction. Dr. Elizabeth Chun, a civilian ballistics consultant who had been brought in to analyze the physics, presented her preliminary findings. Based on the environmental conditions and distances involved, I calculate that Staff Sergeant Rodriguez's bullet traveled approximately 1,247 meters total, including the ricochet paths. The bullet retained lethal velocity throughout this journey, striking all 3 targets with sufficient force to neutralize them. What impressed the assembled experts even more than the successful execution was Maria's real-time problem-solving under extreme pressure. The ability to visualize complex ballistics calculations while maintaining the composure necessary for precision shooting represented a combination of technical skill and mental discipline that was extraordinary even among elite snipers. Colonel Bennett addressed the broader implications. Rodriguez, beyond the immediate tactical success, your action today has demonstrated capabilities that could influence how we approach future sniper operations. The strategic value of being able to engage multiple targets simultaneously could be significant in urban environments or when dealing with time-sensitive situations. As news of Maria's achievement spread throughout the base, Marines from various units found reasons to visit the area where she was conducting her debriefing. Word had traveled quickly through the informal communication networks that exist in military communities, and the story had grown with each telling. By evening, Marines were describing the shot in terms that bordered on mythology. Master Sergeant Lisa Park, who ran the base's sniper training program, pulled Maria aside after the formal debriefing. Rodriguez, what you did today is going to change how we think about advanced marksmanship training. We need to document every aspect of your methodology so we can understand whether this type of engagement can be replicated or if it was truly a once-in-a-lifetime combination of skill and circumstances. The psychological impact of Maria's achievement extended beyond the immediate military implications. For the Marines at Forward Operating Base Chapman, who had been dealing with the constant threat of improvised explosive devices, the elimination of a major bomb-making cell represented both tactical success and symbolic victory. The idea that a single Marine with exceptional skill could neutralize multiple high-value targets simultaneously provided a powerful boost to unit morale. Intelligence reports confirmed that the 3 eliminated bomb makers had been responsible for creating devices that had killed 6 Marines and wounded 18 others over the previous 2 months. The materials recovered from the compound included enough components to construct dozens of additional bombs, representing a significant reduction in future threats to Marine operations in the region. Captain Thompson, who had authorized Maria's unconventional shot, found himself fielding calls from higher headquarters as word of the achievement reached senior commanders throughout the theater of operations. The implications for future tactics and training were already being discussed at levels far above the normal scope of a single sniper engagement. As the day progressed, Maria began to understand that her life in the Marine Corps had fundamentally changed. The shot she had made would follow her throughout her military career and, likely beyond. She would be called upon to share her experience with trainers, tacticians, and future snipers who would study her methods and attempt to understand how such an achievement was possible. The technical analysis of the shot would continue for weeks as experts attempted to recreate the conditions and verify the ballistics calculations. High-speed cameras, computer simulations, and detailed mathematical models would be employed to understand every aspect of the bullet's journey through the compound. But for Maria Rodriguez, sitting in that debriefing room surrounded by amazed fellow Marines, the most important result was simpler. 3 dangerous enemies had been eliminated, Marine lives had been saved, and the mission had been accomplished with precision and professionalism that honored the traditions of Marine Corps marksmanship. As the formal debriefing concluded and the officers began to file out, Colonel Bennett approached Maria with a final observation. "Staff Sergeant, what you accomplished today will be studied and discussed for years to come. But I want you to remember that beyond all the technical analysis and expert opinions, you made a decision under pressure that saved American lives. That's what makes you not just an exceptional sniper, but an exceptional Marine." 3 weeks after the remarkable triple engagement, Maria Rodriguez found herself The audience consisted of the Corps' most experienced snipers, ballistics experts from various military branches, and civilian contractors who developed advanced shooting systems for the Department of Defense. What had started as a combat action in Afghanistan had evolved into a case study that was reshaping military understanding of advanced marksmanship capabilities. The presentation screen behind Maria displayed detailed diagrams showing the trajectory of her single bullet as it traveled through the compound, striking 3 targets in sequence. Computer animations demonstrated the physics involved in each ricochet, while mathematical equations filled adjacent screens with calculations that had been refined and verified by teams of experts over the previous weeks. Colonel Patricia Hayes, the school's commandant, introduced Maria to the assembled audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to hear represents not just an extraordinary individual achievement, but a fundamental expansion of what we believe possible in sniper operations. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez's engagement has been analyzed by our finest ballistics experts, and the conclusions challenge conventional wisdom about the practical limits of precision shooting." Maria stepped to the podium, still somewhat uncomfortable with the attention her achievement had generated. In the 3 weeks since the shot, she had been interviewed by military historians, consulted with weapons designers, and asked to review training protocols that had been standard for decades. The transformation from field operative to recognized expert had happened with bewildering speed. The success of this engagement, Maria began, was built on fundamental principles that every sniper learns during basic training: understanding environmental conditions, calculating bullet trajectory, and maintaining composure under pressure. What made this situation unusual was the opportunity to apply these principles in a way that hadn't been attempted before. Dr. Michael Stevens, a ballistics physicist from the Aberdeen Proving Ground, raised his hand from the audience. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, our computer models indicate that the margin for error in your shot was approximately 0.3 degrees of angle deviation. How did you achieve that level of precision under field conditions?" Maria paused thoughtfully before responding. "Sir, the precision came from understanding that this wasn't really one shot with multiple ricochets, but rather 3 interconnected shots that had to be calculated as a single system. I had to visualize the bullet's entire journey and work backward from where I needed it to end up." The explanation sparked intense discussion among the assembled experts. Traditional sniper training focused on engaging single targets with maximum precision, but Maria's achievement suggested that multi-target engagements might be possible under specific conditions. The implications for urban warfare and counterterrorism operations were significant. Major Sandra Mitchell, who directed the school's advanced marksmanship program, asked the question many in the audience were considering. "Rodriguez, do you believe this type of engagement can be reliably taught and replicated, or was it primarily dependent on unique circumstances and exceptional individual skill?" Maria had been wrestling with this question since the debriefing in Afghanistan. "Ma'am, I think the principles can be taught, but the application requires a combination of environmental factors that won't always be present. The key elements were predictable target positioning, suitable ricochet surfaces, and sufficient time for calculation. Remove any one of those factors, and the shot becomes impossible. The honesty of her assessment impressed the audience of professional shooters. Rather than claiming that her achievement could be easily duplicated, Maria provided a realistic evaluation of the specific conditions that had made success possible. This analytical approach demonstrated the intellectual rigor that separated exceptional snipers from merely skilled marksmen. Captain James Morrison from the Marine Corps' Weapons Training Battalion presented data from attempts to recreate Maria's shot under controlled conditions. We've conducted 17 simulation attempts using identical equipment and measured distances. The success rate has been approximately 12%, even with unlimited time for calculation and preparation. This confirms that what Staff Sergeant Rodriguez accomplished under combat conditions represents performance at the absolute pinnacle of marksmanship capability. The statistics provided concrete evidence of the achievement's significance. A 12% success rate under ideal conditions highlighted how remarkable it was that Maria had succeeded on her first attempt while under combat stress with lives depending on the outcome. As the presentation continued, Maria found herself answering increasingly technical questions about wind compensation, ricochet angle calculations, and the psychological aspects of attempting such an unconventional shot. The audience's expertise pushed her to articulate concepts she had intuited during the engagement, but hadn't fully analyzed until now. Sergeant Major William Davis, a 30-year veteran with extensive combat experience, asked about the decision-making process. Rodriguez, at what point did you become confident that the shot was worth attempting rather than requesting alternative tactical support? Sergeant Major, I realized that conventional alternatives would take too long to coordinate. The intelligence indicated the targets were preparing to leave, and we had confirmation that they were responsible for multiple Marine casualties. The risk of letting them escape outweighed the low probability of success with the ricochet shot. This response highlighted another crucial aspect of Maria's achievement: the tactical judgment required to attempt such an unconventional solution. Military decision-making under pressure often involves choosing between options with uncertain outcomes, and Maria's ability to quickly assess the situation and select the highest value course of action demonstrated leadership potential beyond her technical shooting skills. Dr. Stevens returned with another question about the physics involved. The energy transfer calculations show that your bullet lost approximately 40% of its velocity after the first ricochet, yet it retained sufficient energy to neutralize the remaining targets. How did you account for this energy loss in your initial calculations? Maria referred to notes she had compiled during her preparation for the presentation. Sir, I estimated energy loss based on the angle and surface characteristics of the concrete wall. The .50 caliber round carries substantial kinetic energy, and I calculated that even with significant velocity reduction, the bullet would remain lethal at the distances involved. The mathematical precision required for such calculations under combat conditions continued to impress the assembled experts. Real-time ballistics calculations typically focused on single trajectories with known variables, but Maria had needed to account for multiple unknown factors while maintaining the mental composure necessary for precision shooting. As the presentation session concluded, Colonel Hayes addressed the broader implications for Marine Corps training. What we've learned today will influence how we approach advanced sniper instruction. While we can't expect to routinely train Marines to duplicate Staff Sergeant Rodriguez's specific achievement, we can certainly incorporate the analytical thinking and creative problem-solving that made it possible. The session ended with a standing ovation from the assembled audience, recognition that extended beyond military courtesy to genuine respect for an extraordinary achievement. Maria had not only succeeded in eliminating 3 high-value targets with a single shot, but had also expanded the Marine Corps' understanding of what was possible in precision shooting. Following the formal presentation, Maria was approached by numerous attendees who wanted to discuss specific aspects of her methodology. Weapons designers asked about equipment modifications that might facilitate similar shots. Training specialists inquired about instructional techniques that could develop the analytical skills she had demonstrated. Intelligence officers wanted to understand how such capabilities might be integrated into future operational planning. The conversations continued long into the evening as the military's finest marksmanship experts dissected every aspect of an achievement that had already become legendary within sniper communities. For Maria, the experience provided validation that her success had been built on solid technical foundations rather than mere luck, while also highlighting the responsibility that came with such recognition. As she prepared to return to her unit, Maria reflected on how a single moment of exceptional performance had transformed her military career and contributed to the evolution of Marine Corps doctrine. The shot she had made in Afghanistan would influence training programs, tactical planning, and equipment development for years to come, ensuring that her achievement would benefit future Marines facing similar challenges in combat. 2 years after the legendary triple engagement in Afghanistan, Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez stood in a very different environment from the desert compound where she had made military history. The pristine shooting range at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia, hummed with activity as federal agents, military personnel, and elite law enforcement officers gathered for the inaugural Advanced Multi-Target Engagement course that had been developed based on her revolutionary techniques. Maria, now serving as the primary instructor for the program, watched as students attempted to master the complex calculations and environmental assessments that had become standard curriculum following her achievement. The course represented the culmination of 2 years of research, analysis, and program development that had transformed a single combat action into a comprehensive training methodology. The students on the range represented the finest shooters from multiple agencies and military branches. FBI hostage rescue teams, Navy SEAL snipers, Army Special Forces marksmen, and Marine Corps Scout snipers had all sent their most capable personnel to learn techniques that might prove crucial in future operations where multiple high-value targets needed to be engaged simultaneously. Agent Sarah Chun from the FBI's elite hostage rescue team raised her hand during the morning briefing. Instructor Rodriguez, the scenarios we've been practicing involve known distances and controlled environmental conditions. How do you adapt these techniques when operating in urban environments with unknown ricochet surfaces and unpredictable target movement? Maria moved to the tactical board where she had sketched a complex urban scenario involving multiple hostile targets positioned on different levels of a building structure. Agent Chun, urban environments actually provide more ricochet opportunities than desert terrain, but they also introduce variables that require real-time adaptation. The key is developing pattern recognition skills that allow you to quickly assess surface materials, angles, and structural integrity. The evolution of Maria's techniques into formal training doctrine had required extensive collaboration with physicists, materials engineers, and tactical specialists. Computer modeling had identified optimal angles for different surface materials, while ballistics testing had established velocity requirements for various ricochet scenarios. What had begun as intuitive field calculations had been transformed into precise scientific methodology. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Taylor from the Army's Special Operations Command asked about the psychological aspects of attempting such unconventional shots. Rodriguez, how do you train shooters to maintain confidence in techniques that have such low statistical success rates? Maria paused thoughtfully before responding, drawing on her experience training dozens of elite marksmen over the past year. Sir, confidence comes from understanding the science behind the technique rather than hoping for luck. When shooters can calculate the physics and verify their environmental assessments, they develop genuine confidence in their ability to execute these engagements when conditions are favorable. The training program had evolved far beyond simple marksmanship instruction to encompass advanced physics, materials science, and tactical decision-making. Students learned to identify suitable ricochet surfaces, calculate complex trajectory paths, and, most importantly, recognize when conditions were appropriate for attempting multi-target engagements versus employing conventional alternatives. Dr. Michael Stevens, the ballistics physicist who had analyzed Maria's original shot, now served as the course's scientific advisor. He addressed the class about recent technological developments. The success of Rodriguez's engagement has driven innovation in several areas. We now have specialized software that can perform real-time ricochet calculations, advanced rangefinders that provide surface composition analysis, and ballistics computers that account for multi-trajectory variables. While technology had enhanced the precision of multi-target engagement planning, Maria emphasized that fundamental marksmanship skills remain paramount. Technology supports decision-making, but it cannot replace the need for perfect trigger control, precise breathing techniques, and the ability to maintain focus under extreme pressure. The most sophisticated ballistics computer in the world cannot compensate for poor shooting fundamentals. The course's practical exercises progressed from basic ricochet mechanics to complex scenarios involving multiple moving targets, varied environmental conditions, and time-critical situations. Students learned to recognize the narrow window of opportunity when all necessary factors aligned for successful multi-target engagement. Master Sergeant Lisa Park, who had trained alongside Maria during the program's development, demonstrated advanced techniques to the assembled students. The evolution of these methods has revealed applications we never initially considered. Urban counterterrorism, hostage rescue, and convoy protection scenarios all present opportunities for multi-target engagement when conventional approaches might result in unacceptable casualties or mission failure. The impact of Maria's achievement extended beyond military and law enforcement applications. Academic institutions had begun incorporating the case study into physics and engineering curricula, using the mathematical principles to illustrate complex concepts in ballistics, materials science, and applied physics. The shot had become a teaching tool that demonstrated how theoretical knowledge could be applied under extreme practical conditions. Captain Jennifer Morrison from the Marine Corps' Weapons Training Battalion provided statistics on the program's effectiveness. Over the past 18 months, we've trained 847 personnel in advanced multi-target engagement techniques. While the success rate for actual triple engagements remains low, the analytical thinking and problem-solving skills developed through this training have improved overall marksmanship performance by an average of 23%. The data confirmed that even students who never successfully executed multi-target engagements benefited significantly from the advanced training. The comprehensive approach to environmental analysis, trajectory calculation, and tactical assessment enhanced their capabilities across all shooting scenarios. As the afternoon training session began, Maria observed her students applying the techniques she had developed under combat conditions in Afghanistan. The transformation of battlefield innovation into formal doctrine represented one of the most rapid adoption cycles in modern military training history, driven by the documented effectiveness of methods that had once seemed impossible. Agent David Kumar from the Secret Service Counter-Assault Team approached Maria during a break between exercises. Instructor Rodriguez, our protective details have identified several scenarios where these techniques could prevent assassination attempts that conventional sniper positioning might not address. The ability to engage multiple threats simultaneously could be crucial for protecting high-value individuals in complex environments. The conversation highlighted how Maria's achievement continued to influence tactical thinking across multiple disciplines. Each agency and military unit that studied her methods discovered applications specific to their mission requirements, expanding the impact far beyond the original context of counterinsurgency operations. As evening approached and the day's training concluded, Maria found herself reflecting on the journey from a single moment of inspiration in an Afghan compound to leading a revolutionary training program that was reshaping precision shooting across the military and law enforcement communities. The students departing the range that day would return to their units carrying knowledge and techniques that might prove crucial in future operations. Some would face hostage situations where multiple perpetrators needed to be neutralized simultaneously. Others might encounter terrorist scenarios where conventional engagement protocols would be insufficient. All of them now possessed analytical tools and methodological approaches that expanded their operational capabilities. Colonel Hayes, who had traveled from Camp Pendleton to observe the training program's progress, approached Maria as the range activities concluded. Rodriguez, what you've accomplished extends far beyond that single shot in Afghanistan. You've fundamentally changed how we think about the possibilities and limitations of precision shooting. This program will influence military and law enforcement operations for decades to come. Maria looked out across the empty shooting range where students had spent the day learning to see opportunities that previous generations of marksmen had never imagined possible. The legacy of her achievement would continue to evolve as new students brought fresh perspectives and innovative applications to techniques that had originated from a moment of tactical desperation in a combat zone thousands of miles away. The impossible shot that had eliminated 3 bomb makers with a single bullet had become something greater than a remarkable individual achievement. It had become a catalyst for innovation, a foundation for new training methodologies, and an inspiration for marksmen who would push the boundaries of what was considered possible in precision shooting. As Maria secured her equipment and prepared to leave the range, she knew that somewhere in the world, elite operators trained in her techniques were preparing for missions where the ability to engage multiple targets simultaneously might mean the difference between success and failure, between lives saved and lives lost. The principles she had discovered under combat pressure would continue to serve those who faced impossible odds, and needed to find ways to achieve the impossible.